Mm. Mm.
Good afternoon, Geshe. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I'm joining a little late. We will start session at 3:05, Geshe, right? We'll wait for 2 more minutes for everyone to join. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We will be joining in 2 minutes at 3:05. Geshe, I'll try to share my screen. I'll see if this time if I can.
Yes, yes.
You will need to make me co-host, maybe.
Okay, sir.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, but too small, too small.
It's too small.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Okay, then.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Oh, that will be nice, Nikhila. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 9th session of Nagarjuna's Letter to a Friend. Thank you, Geshe, for this teaching, and we are so blessed to have Village Amsa Center here. and we are blessed to have Tenzin Lakpala as a translator. Welcome everyone once again. We will recite the prayers. Nikila, can you share the prayers? Is it possible? Otherwise, I'll read from my phone.
I don't know. I don't have the prayers on my laptop.
Okay. I'll read from my computer screen. Sorry, but I won't be able to share the screen. Yeah, starting right. Yeah, please join me for the prayers. Taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. Sorry, I hope I'm audible. Okay. Sorry, I'm starting again. Taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. For immeasurables. May all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. May all sentient beings not be separated from the bliss that is free of suffering. May all sentient beings live in equanimity, free from attachment and hatred towards those near and far. May all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. May all sentient beings not be separated from the bliss that is free of suffering. May all sentient beings live in equanimity, free from attachment and hatred towards those near and far. May all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. May all sentient beings not be separated from the bliss that is free of suffering. May all sentient beings live in equanimity, free from attachment and hatred towards those near and far. Thank you. Geshe, I would request you to start the teachings, and thank you, Tenzin Lakpala, as a translator here.
Right, hello everyone. Nice meet you again. Sadiri, the Kasang on the way. Tibetic that Deva Kone Kasana Comte or some Kasana. Kasan Nigila Kasana Chesosana. On the Comda the Jago Mikpada number the Timbena Tenque and the country race. Digi and Tibetan dance the Kasan Lenja and the Kasan the Lenja was some master was on the Comja Vacaso, Comja Yudi and Mikpada number. And temben하는 년에네 곰잖아 간대도 것도 네고라 내가 이제 곰 디자인 전바다 인제 곰지 디자인
Tashtele to everyone, and today we're going to do the meditation practice on one of the questions which was posed in the previous session by Nikila. Though Geshe has answered it, he says that the question about the image and the visualization to be retained in the mind and how to put that into the practice of meditation. So Geshe said that today we're going to put that into actual practice by doing a meditation practice on compassion and loving kindness.
so 담보대 안에 네 인제 컴패션이라 담보 인제 자지 단연제 담보 건제가 가서 먼저에다 인제게 곰자세 유저라 유디 담보된 가전데 소소게 셈다 니쇼 미시 소소 셈다 니쇼 미시샤다 소소게 보이나레 더 tro보이나레 능미나 카이나 디 안데미 요르송 디미요스모 마산 디게 안에 동게 냄주다 안에 넘버 컨디션 이렇게 막 계좌시 되고 또 그 시에 가서 냄주 컨디션 gamma 시에 가서 냄주 컨디션 정말 셈나 차바천 차바체베고네 안에 담보대 안에 닌제 고멘다 저랑 안에 동화다 차바쇼서 직제 안에 마세 지 둥아 잠마다 마세 단자가 아니 소소게다 셈다 니쇼 미디가 아니 강아 가려요 르 강아에 나래 셈디 강아에 나 근데 믹스하게 근데 지여다 봐이나 근데 강아 근데 좋은 뉴도 쳐봐쇼 삼상고 근데 mikpa chawra kuna ane kama chaga tachi kumde. Goma jangona namjiyo sopo netande, sopo namjiyo kata nga zo kondo, ngama doshawa nashi ane lui sangma kasi thangpo san ane sopo kanda ina de, kharade dewa yana da, kampal dewa kharade yaga yana di chane ane u thangma nyi sumta. Di chukla ane tatanda kondo shuba nashi, soso semda nyebe mitike ane dunga khacha chunda. Nyingje gomba, nyingje dunga tachabara, dunga da kanga dunga chabas lakpado ana midela semji kanga ina luji kanga ina dinda thera some sem ding de mo dinda mid number shaba kone kama chekte che is kama chega sum
So the first practice we're going to do is the meditation on compassion. And we're going to do this meditation by visualizing someone, imagining and visualizing someone who is nearest and dearest to us. And then as we focus on that image, try to recall their facial expressions, when they're happy, when they're laughing. So try to visualize it vividly and clearly, the image of their face when they're happy, laughing. And then afterwards, try to generate the mind that may they be free from all suffering. And then as you imagine that, try to visualize. The second thing you do is try to visualize their facial expression, their suffering. When they're suffering, either it be a suffering that is physical or be it a mental suffering. So visualize and imagine those suffering, and then generate the mind saying that may they be free from all these suffering. So we're going to do a 30-second meditation on this by visualizing this image.
da tanda ujung sumsta ane kotso shi
So again, the body posture, which we have discussed, it could be usually it's straight spine and you may sit in any position that is the most comfortable to you. And so we're going to start this meditation by slowly inhaling and exhaling 3 times.
onde shi da de juma de la ane chamba ko mes da mi tagaran shi mi tagaran mi yu tagaran ba kan shi la kabene ane jona dewa da temba sho ane jona ane karena das dichi khatte karena yaga samje jona yoma sho dinde sta is tagaran moten kama chega
So next meditation is on loving kindness. The object of meditation will be the same, but instead of thinking on visualizing, may they be free from all suffering. Now we're going to generate the intention or the mind that says that may they attain or possess all the blissfulness and happiness. So we have the same object of visualization, same focus, but instead of the compassion, now we're going to focus on loving kindness for 30 seconds.
뭔데지? 네, 다단다데 미유트베라. 미유트베네 밤에 심지 제주미에 심지지. 네, 다 남지 통대가 나가거나 또다가 어디에 들어지. 아니, 미유 심베고네 아니. 아, 같이 가셔지. 그런 동화도 잡으셔. 년적금. 디줄라는 같이 가셔지. 되지. 잠바꾸면 어디시다 되지.
Now, we shift our object. So we change our object from someone near and dear to us to someone that is a neutral being, someone who is sort of like a stranger to us. So first few seconds, we focus on the same object of meditation, that is a neutral being, and then try to generate the intent of compassion, saying that may that sentient being be free from all suffering.
대가져야 돼. 내가 밤에 심지들라 양자 이 잠바꾸면 있어. 같이
And
가시.
then with that same object of meditation, the same object being neutral being, now shift your intention from compassion to loving kindness, and generating the intent or the mind saying that may they possess or attain all blissfulness and happiness.
뭔데지? 당한테 단다 주변 얘기 들은 거나. 그래서 나 주변 담보대 가서나 네 수저게 심다 예배 밑에 명이 아니 잠바다 어머니 예조 검라. 근데 니버도 잠바 검라. 니니 바로 제가 갔다 주변 담보대지. 소소소 전당 셈나라. 근데 제가 나도 잠바 검백 가서다 저와대다 예조 검백 가서 근데 저번에 제가 갈려고 되면 소소게 심다 예배 밑에 명이 가서
So Geshe said that he has two questions regarding today's practice. First is for the first meditation that we did, as we had the object of meditation as someone who was near and dear to us. So Geshe is asking, was there difference in the sensation and the feeling in the mind when we were meditating on compassion, and at the time when we were meditating on loving kindness, if whether there were any difference in the emotions that arise during that particular practice or during that particular meditation. So this is the question of Geshe. He said, during the practice, the first practice of meditating as an object of someone who is near to us, when you were meditating on compassion and when you were meditating on loving kindness, were there any difference in the emotion that aroused within the mind? So he's asking.
In the chat box, I can see Diptila is saying, yes, it was a lot harder to do the practice the second time. And I also said that, yes, there was a difference.
Geshe la Quran ki songdang che na tanda nga zo de wo de nga chegi tanda konzo len sha sa de la dipti la songdang che sna nga chegi ningje le chamba gong du de ska le mang che sons de nil kheba ge ji dos ani chamba gong du nga zo de che ka le kha ga dos mi ba dan de zo den de ji kwang song sha
이제 아니 주변 이와도 가서나 다 미유 카페라 미유 카페에 밤에 심지를 미고라 밤에 심지를 미고 아니 잠바다니 조금라 니니다 아니 소sek선단 이외 미들을 미고게 잠바니 니니 습게 되라 아니 근데 채워도 됩니다.
So the second question Geshe is posing is that during the first session, session of practice, we had the object of meditation as someone who was near and dear to us. And then we changed the focus to someone that was a neutral being, someone as a stranger. So Geshe is posing this question. He said, was there any difference or was there indifference in the difficulty of arising the mind of compassion and loving kindness when you've shifted the focus from someone near to you to someone that is a stranger? Was there any difficulty generating that mind when you were doing for the second one? So this is the question that Geshe was asking.
Yes, I can see in the chat box, Nikhila is saying it is a lot more difficult to focus on a stranger. While Diptila is saying, yes, it was difficult to focus the mind and emotions.
라송 단다 코로나 손다 지나 단다 니킬라 손다 체스나 간스기 단다 파메기 심진지라 소수 데메 기 심진지라 간스이 참바다 닝제 공백업소 맞아 깔레 카가도스 닝제데 고미야 아니 단다 디딜라 손다 체스나 간스 덴제급소 수수라 초알레와 디간라 삼로지 땅용데 랑기 초와데 땅 로딜라 간스기 믹바샤데 데츠 카포레샤스 덴데 송고도
단다 다가라래 다지네 디 셈다니베 미줄라 천번님제 공미에다 체주메베 미줄라 천번님제 공바나 점년제 띠엘라 쳐버시월다 지단 가서는 체주메베 미줄 년제 공고전에 디스 년제 찍하고 텔레 찍하거든요 소저게 안에 다자보다냐 소저 년제베 미줄라 년제 공나 티베장 안에 깔락하고 있거든 그래서 당번 간저 년제 공배 가서 당보고라는 셈제 탐제라는 건저 하늘 내원님지 셈제 탐제 년제 공면서 라하셔라 하네 라드드는 디 반한통도 거도 좀 더게디 셈나게 소화시라 레그말 당하도 님녀요라 다테서 당보서서 셈나님은 미칠 곰 디 곰백에 님녀 다 카페네 반했음지 드네 안에 수저가 막아베 다니 다당 에스 다이메나야 계세양 소소게 딱바스 무슨 되게 미들서 전절 파 카페 신의 심제 탐제 되저라 디마다 남자들도 가네 심제 탐제 세저라디야 디스 가네 시고다 뭐좀 된게 좋아도 말 저 저바 제라는 뭐 신도 줘야 돼 개점 버렸어.
So Geshe said that is true. When we shift our focus to an object that is someone that is a stranger to us, someone that is more like a neutral person, neither friend nor enemy, it becomes more difficult to arise those kind of mind, to generate those kind of mind within us. And even so more difficult when we are trying to implement the same practice towards someone towards whom we have either aggression or someone who is our enemy, whom we consider to be our enemy. Geshe said that it's even more difficult to generate that same mind towards them. The kind of emotion that arises is not the same. Though Geshe said that usually we say that may all the sentient being be free from suffering, but we ourselves know that at that time we are not able to generate that kind of emotion within us that we feel for someone near and dear to us when we are thinking about their well-being. But as he said, Geshe said, this is true because of all the experience he had from his own practice and understanding of these things. He said that therefore one should first begin with a smaller circle that is someone who is near and dear to us and try to generate that mind, and intent for them, and slowly expanding that circle to someone much more further to us, and then to a neutral person. And then finally, when we are able to generate that kind of mind towards someone that is our enemy, then we're able to fully generate that mind when we say, may all sentient being be free from suffering.
진짜 안단다 잠바다 ninja 공배 가서 그냥 카시알 갈래서나 디 단다 디딜라라 가서나 잠바 공배 가서 가가 송송서 카시알 양한테 ninja 공배 가서 디 셈나나 카가서나 디 셈나나 ninja 공배 가서 디 세리야 셈나나 맞지와 또 소화 충전 들어서다 잠바 공배 가서 그냥 디 내가 말했어 좀 내가서나 ninja 공배 가서 그냥 영화 걸 섬던 거라 영화다 테나 그래서 강아지로 걸 섬던 데는 강아지 테나 섬되네 소소 셈나나 디 시양 마트시도 정해지 연구 다 같이 염려로지 잠바고메 가서 양디 가지는 이거다 미장마다 집어 말아 가서 잠바고메 가서 대화다 내려 약하도 시고다 대화다 때문에 주지 저런 상황 야고 영어쇼 레드는 양디스 두개 걸었어 년제다 내가 중앙한테 걸 시고 말아 니저 고메 가서 중앙 섬다는 아니 양디스 그때 영예로 시고다 선
So Geshe said, and also the other case where Diptila said that it was more difficult to generate the mind of loving kindness in comparison to compassion. And he said that is true. He said that when we're generating both of these different type of mind, especially during the focus being in the time of generating compassion, the focus arises from thinking about the suffering of all the sentient beings and then thinking that may they be free from all this suffering. But sometimes when we focus too much on the aspect of suffering, we feel we arise the emotion of sadness within us. So therefore, in times when we try to generate the mind of compassion, there might be a slight arising of the mind of sadness. And this is true. And that is due to the focus on the suffering. So therefore, though it may not arise during the time of focusing on the generating the mind of loving kindness, because we're only focusing on may they attain blissfulness, happiness. We're only thinking about happiness and blissfulness. And since the mind diverts towards that focus, it is more difficult to arise the emotion of sadness during that practice. But in the case of compassion, sometimes people may arise those emotions because of the focus. So this may differ from person to person.
그냥 네콜레한 되거든요. 저 직스로스티 그냥 네 쉬운 거 맞죠. 그래서
So Geshe is saying, if anyone has any question regarding the meditative practice that we did, or on compassion, or on loving kindness and difference between this, he will take one question, and after that, we're going to move to the actual text, the letter to a friend.
네 저거 몇 사람 안 받으셨구나.
Geshe said, since it seems that there's no questions, we're going to move towards the actual lesson.
나 계산돼. 근데 되게 같이. 집주 식구들이 있더래. 다 집주 식구들 가서나 컨디션은 다 먼저게 나다 통보 줘라. 나다 통보 내당 걸 씌웠다. 나다 통보 내당의 컨디션이에요. 그래서 그래서 내가 내양 되시면 띵서부터 그냥 고쳐줘 남자 곧 되버세요. 맞대서 차부터 저러다 돼. 디칸스는 다른 거 내당데. 컨디션이에요. 그래서 시대는 통보디 대체 맞은 걸로 통보 다 세줘라. 다스는 컨디션을 쓰게 됐어. 다스 지난게 나 주주들 다양 맨다고 먹고 싶다. 다스는 가서다. 단지 망을 좀 배워도 다 가시에서나 가서는 가서는 닝을 했어야 돼. 야, 가시 나 때로 가시는 시대냐? 닝 나로도 아직 요르세도. 근데 이제 안되는 생각이야. 마만 난 데마트 배워서 그냥 다스에 가서냐? 디 다스에 딱 말했어. 주버 좀 돼요, 말했어. 다스에 들어가면 유효하다. 제가 토만에 유효. 저만 로데 워스마도 딱 말해 주어 줘요, 말했어. 직접. 근데도 저지. 어 다양한 남배 투데요. 남배 투데 된 나라야. 근데 다 되서 다 뭐에 된 줄이야. 근데 맨다 망고였어. 가시에서는 답변은 셈자 받는 다세데 셈세데다. 근시세데레스 셈자고. 어딘데 로서보다 뒤좀 망고였어.
So today we're going to discuss the 49th verse, and this particular verse talks about the existence of self and aggregates, and so it talks about the idea of the existence of self and aggregate, and so both of these concepts are quite complicated. This particular verse is going to be much more difficult to understand than the previous ones we have discussed. So before we discuss this verse, we must understand what is self. So the question arises, what is self? And we must understand that the assertion of self differs from different philosophical schools, be it Buddhist or non-Buddhist philosophical school. They have different ways of explaining what is a self. They assert different ideas and concepts. For example, some might say that self is something that exists in the heart or the core of a being. And then there are assertion that self itself is something that is a permanent phenomena that has a continuum, which is which is free or irrespective of time, and that it has been and it still is, and then it will be. So it's more of like a concept that self itself is a concept which exists as a permanent phenomena. And then even if we talk about the Buddhist philosophical schools, we have different Buddhist philosophical schools, as we know, especially the mind-only school, the Chittamatra, talks about the alaya as the object of self, or the target or the object of self. So we see that there are many different assertions when we talk about self.
지난 가도 미주마도 될 직치나 저랑 저랑 거와야는 막 거와야서나 또 망자지도 봐 닝급들 조조니로 지라 도와지게 해도 좋지 다 망고제 지난 가도 이제 딱 제주는 맞아야겠다는 이제 해야되면 지금 닝 나눠도 소부 나눠도 지 마세 지금 해도 봐 집에도 그러나 그런 데 랑전 받이 해도 봐 촬영 못 하고 나눠 지금 가서는 또 지금 해도 봐 좋지 그때 시작 마찬가지로 좋지 근데 지 망불 열다 전화 ngasan kharesana ngasan tahasana khawasana to chi yesana be kora kora chi nalo do pa chi che deng che yo do so yung ges ni chong de sonyo zo de min das kande do jing de che ngasan.
So in a more conventional investigation, we understand that when we ask someone in a very mundane kind of sense, if we ask, where is self? And we'll see that they will either point to their brain, or they will point towards their heart, and they'll say, self is here. It's like the concept that there is a self that exists. And many a times when we ask this question to the people in a more conventional investigation, we understand that they tend to have this idea that there is a self that exists independent of independently, that there is a self that can be pointed towards. There is an independent self towards which we can point towards and say, this is the self here, this is self, this is I. So therefore, and then Geshe is asking that usually when we talk about self, all of us more or less come to that conclusion that when we say where is self, there is someone or something that we point towards that is independently functioning and existing. So this comes to our mind. And so Geshe asks that, does it come to every one of you when we ask the question, where is self? Do every one of you think self-existing, independent of, independently functioning and existing?
I think, yes, it appears in the mundane life. Is there anyone who would like to share?
I wonder, I don't know, I feel self is not in the material body. You know, there is some sensation of the heart on meditation, which perhaps is more interconnected. But then even the concept of time, I think, is entwined with space as well. You know, that maybe the two are not separatable. So yeah, but I don't know the answer. So maybe Geshe can help.
Geshe tanda dipti la Quran ki songtang chena tanda nga zogi da sheba chi nga zogi chi zui yung du nga zogi chi diga mikpa da sha yung du nga zogi chi nyingka yosa dewa chi la nga zo yuebe chi chanang ra chi tang chowa ra chi lega dus nga zo dinde ra chi da chi mendro sam sam ra chi yang nga zu da she ba de nga chu gi chi tang gi nga chu gi ching wo byo gi ne dang ching wo byo gi nga chu gi rak be cha la nga zu chi yore sam sang da chi min dos ho chi pen zu nga zu chi nang khun la nga zu den de ba chi pen zu chi den je nga zu da ja ji sha gyu yo ba ji pen na cha sha na nga zu tu ta nam kha she ba de chi ta ne nga zu pen ni tu ta na nga zu gi ko ni zho yo ma de ma to ne chi dang chi ne be che dong nga zu pen zu den de ge yo ba ji nang xin 다 셰버지다 칭오변이 등아주 덴데체제 아주 도도지 체제 저 요래라는 게 요말때 편준이 아주 마드바지 요말에 선거도라치 콩초지레 쉬러 콩기 렌테레샤 아니 탄타 니킬라 코랑기 송단체스나 아주기 녜 세버랑 셰마송 스티콜라 자원인 셰마송테 마톤티 지다네 아주 탄타 다간게 셰교데 타마 밥사 등아주 땡진저 중앙강 밥그레베스라치 디스 게저티샤
다 단다 딥딜라나 디도지 소와 다라 레그다 니 방보질 가서는 다 달라드네 더 지금 여대 버도 지금 여대 버도 저는 언제에다 난저 돈의 시야잖아 단지 세저라 단지 시대에 다 되면 다 세대 단지 세대라 언제 그때 개만은 뭐 뭐지 컴대서 다 단지 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 언제 좀 나로 컴대도 되네 다 세우지 지금 그런데 지금 여대 버도 님급도 와다 소고 나로 지 소고로 왕왕 요된 거지 근데 여대 버도 소와치라 그랬어 뒤에는 가져서는 단지 왕이 보랬어 다시는 다세도 응원에 다가라 다세대 디 세서나 다 소고나는 제나래 샘나는 제나래 거 제바나 다 데레도 세게 조소에 되다라고 말 당 내정 뭐마데 다 다이나래 가래나 빠제도나 데레스 용만 때 내용아 좀데 다 되다 에 마세 단다 된지 중앙 중앙 세다 다 하나 채우다 딥딜라다 네게 그러니 시원하지 다들 풍부를 봤댄데 다들 풍부를 떼네 돼 풍부대 파주 다를 때 다다 풍부니 파주 찍을 찍 떼네 돼 그래서 가지고 먼저 속들을 가지고 다들 내 돼. 속되면은 다들 내도 말해 다들 면은 속돼요 말 어떤 파 찍을 찍 떼네 돼
Uh, so Geshe said that true, that is how it appears to be in the beginning when we try to meditate on self. There seems to be something that exists, like there is a sensation towards the heart that tells us that there is something there which could be the self. And that all of these idea that the self exists intrinsically and independently of the cause is due to our impression, our very sort of like our impression that has come with the continuum of our self, which is the concept of the true existence of self. We consider that self exists, and it exists intrinsically and independent of cause. And that kind of concept, which is the true existence of self, is what tells us that there is a controller that is controlling this body and making us do all the things that we see. But when we go into a more deeper investigation in self and try to find that very independent element of self within our body and our existence, we come to a conclusion that there isn't a single unitary element within us which we could call self that is independently existing and doing all these things. And so when we come to a more deeper investigation, it does come to the idea of dependent origination, that self exists dependently on causes, on its components. And so therefore, it is true that it will come back to dependent origination. That's what Geshe Nikila to. Yes, Nikila.
Yeah, hi. So I think Geshe actually just answered some of my questions already. So I think that's good because I was when Geshe was talking about the self, I think he was trying to help us come to this kind of conclusion. And for those of us who attended Dorje Damdo's class, that's what he talked about a lot, dependent origination and how it relates to emptiness. And today, after hearing Geshe, I can understand how it also relates to the self. So basically, dependent origination just says that there is no independent phenomena, right? Everything depends on something else. So does that mean like when we talk about self, is that also just like a phenomena Is that a okay way to look at that? Look at self? So that's the only question I have.
라서 게실라 코랑게 송당 체스나타 와타가나레스 게실라 깅이 단다 토바여바디 단다디 땡중셰베 게자디기 칼칸점 세송스 아니 nganzo 망보지 단다 데나 여바디 nganzo 게시 도지dom디 nganzo 땡영ngazo 단다 진라드나 존예든 조이나 콘즈 게도님들 기 카투인스나 데송고도 송ngazo 땡진저 중화데 똥니 코알라 파자지여로 다 talente lang zo tenjin ro chunga tinga zo da la ya chupo thugi chogi yo batiki ne zu tinge thani she so song so ro khonang ki ta khonang ki chho di khar re shala na nga zo gi tanda nga zo gi da she batiki ja shen de da she bati chue re besla chi ta de chho re sha khonang ki da she bati chue yin ba nga zo gi ngelen che chogu re besla chi ro nga zo gi yo ba ji da chue ji yin ba chi
다 단다디 다세데 최 임마스이다 다된 가서 최랑 kelling 거 최되는 가서 그다 예와제라 딱 봐다 메타바니지 딱 봐서 좋아 좋아면 나가네 진짜 메타바들이야 아니 숨치고다 숨들라 아니 변보 시와 때문에 되지 그 변보서는 소그래 줘라 아니 남 시와들라 변보다 아니 시와들라 셈셈jo니 변보다 시와 가야 마인백이야 지겨웠어 주버터 타임스 그래서 데미트지레스 다 대한 데미트지 차도스 다 디펜버레스 펜버 말레스 아니 시바레스 시바 말레스 다들 펜버다 시바 열었어 누구나 펜버레 랍동 말레 시바레 랍동 말 그래서 데미트지레스 변은 메딱 봤어요 지당은 지담지 메딱 봤어요 줘라 디야 아니 디레스 데미트지레스 근데 투이세 줘라 저주세 저주 주버도 저주데 시바레스 말레 수그레스 말레 데미트지레스 뭐 근데 얘 봤으면 집에 나게 아니 데미트지레스 저거스 다set
so Kechla said that's so when we talk about self definitely it is a phenomenon. And we have discussed in the past about the types or the classifications of phenomena. We said that phenomena basically can be classified in two groups: permanent phenomena, like the uncompound space, and the impermanent phenomena, like the objects we see, like the air or the water. And even under the permanent phenomena, we have form, mind, and non-possessing compound phenomena. So, for example, the forms are all the gross things that we see, which have shape and colors. Mind are all the 51 mental factors and the three poisons and all the mind, like compassion and loving kindness. And non-possessing phenomena such as the time that we talk about, it's neither form nor mind. So therefore, when we classify phenomena, we find that it comes under either a permanent or an impermanent phenomena. And yes, self is a phenomena.
문제제 다들만 로셔라 다 찍대 찍대 다 시행 찍대도 손에 담아 인시 송대다스 속단 데미 속래 단데미스 달라 송미 네데 대신도스 포몰라마치야 도저제스 포모 되제레미 틀레미스 렌친레미 오분jel레미스 원줄레미 주미제미 미실레다 실레 총르트스 다 시행 찍대데레시
시시고 당업주니까 인사로
냐보 로션
라 당업주 대통면도
아니
lesson. So the verse from A Letter to a Friend, thus it has been said, the form is not the self does not possess the self does not dwell in the form, and the form does not dwell in the self. In this manner also understand the four remaining aggregates as empty. Know that the aggregates originated from chance, time, nature, intrinsic character, God, nor without cause, but from ignorant deeds and cravings.
다때 세제 담보되게 가서는 십지 시고대 가서는 아니 다데 아니 수당 다 란신정 오버직 말을다 사드 다다 수니 란신정 오버직이나 집같은 차도다 집같은 차나 좀 가야라서나 아니 숙만 보여라 숙만 보자 술로 당도 강바 메질로 차잖아 강바 라고라 소바다 베 숙 차차 먹으셔도 술로 근데 다데 아니 먹고 차도 다 찍려요 말았어 그래서 나 다다 숙디 수다 다니 아니 랑진이 뭐직 말했어. 지금 뭐직이 나빠 예매직 차로스. 랑진 예매직 차와나 다 먹고 차에. 아니 교용 그랬어. 그래서 나 다들 수니 뭐직 랑진 뭐직 말했어.
The 49th verse talks that form and self are not truly one, or not one, existing one as truly existence. If it was the case, there is a problem. So the problem is that if self and form were truly one, then we see that even in a single person, there are different forms. We have hands, we have feet. And then there will be a problem. We'll say, since feet and hands are not one, there are multiple, and there are multiple components to a body, then there should exist multiple self, which by analysis is not the fact. So in contradiction to that concept, we find that the multiplicity of self does not exist. And thus, by understanding this, we see that it cannot be that the self and form are truly one, because if that was the case, then there will be multiplicity of self, because there's multiplicity of form. Because there are many form, there should be many self. But according to analysis, this is not the case. So through contradiction, it is thus understood that form and self are not one, not truly one or single.
전에 아니 다 달라 속 대여res. 달라 속 대여나 속 대여데 아니 란식 대여. 타냐도 좀 되면마다 란신지 된바이나 단단한 지 眷라 그래. 달라 속 란식 된바마다 시시어디 가서 다 담보 다다 속 다수 많이 써 직접 수다메스 진짜 되나는 대선 수다 많이 다나 수다메 술라다면 다나 좀 대단 남치도 특도 좀 뭐들 쓰여 숨어 되나 대대 특대마 대셔자도 고문도 그렇게 그래서 나대 안에 수다 뭐니지 직 뭐니지 직 말했어 란신지 뭐니지 다데 달라 다수라 란신지 대마야 말했어 술라 다란신가 요 말에 달라 수란신 요 말했어 시요 되냐 시시올 다 에너지 담보대 안 되지 건도 세워제 다다 순이란 신식 말했어. 란신 지금 말해. 니바데 달라 쑥 되는 란신 되는 말했어. 수바데 달라 쑥 요 말한신 요 말해. 술라 다란신 요 말했어. 다냐도 니가 요때 보지. 시시오 되고. 근데 포말랑 마실라 다나시래서.
So the second case, as we see, as we read through it, it says the form is not the self does not possess the form. So it says that the self does not possess form. Though though in the more conventional understanding, that self does possess a form, but that possession of the form is merely through the imputation of the mind that the self possess the form. But in a true sense, a self cannot possess form. And so therefore, this second division, it states that the self, when it says the self does not possess the form, it means that it does not possess form in the more ultimate sense, in the sense that it does not possess the form truly. But by the mere imputation of the mind, in the more conventional understanding, self does possess the form. And the third one, the self does not dwell in the form, says that similarly, the self itself does not dwell truly in the form. Though self may dwell conventionally or by the imputation of a mind, it does not dwell truly in the form. And then the fourth one is that the form does not dwell in the self, which is in the concept of the true existence. Whereas in the more conventional understanding, or the understanding of the imputation of the mind, it does. So there are four sections in this word. The first one, it says that the form is not self, that the form and self are not truly one. And we talked about the multiplicity being the contradiction. The second one says that the self does not possess form in the sense that it does not possess the form truly, but by the mere imputation of the mind in the conventional sense. And similarly, through the conventional sense, self may dwell in the form, but when we talk about the ultimate sense or truly true existence, self does not dwell in the form, and vice versa, form does not dwell in the self. So there are four partitions in this particular concept. There are four. First, form is not self. Self does not possess form. Second, third is self does not dwell in the form, and fourth is the form does not dwell in self. And when we consider the existence of not, we talk about the true existence and not the conventional understanding.
대제 안에 단다 시계 납주도 가서나 다들 근데 맨 다들 근데서나 아니 다들 통안에 재미 그다 중대버들 말했다. 중대 말에 아니 딱 발라 중조 좀 말했어. 딱 봐줘라 딱 여기도 딱 봤더니 준에 중대버 말했어. 란싱근에 중대버들 말했어. 근데 그런 거랑 소소소소랑 거네 춥대버들 가야 말했어. 아니 기부랑 잡아요라. 군조 어딘데 그 군조랑 잡았다. 제때 그 봐서 빠지 소den게 다 딱바랑 좀 끼고라. 딱바랑 좀 끼고 근데 그 소셔 같은데 가야 말했어. 딱 가서는 나서 근데 중에서는 소소게 안에 제가 막 레다. 어딘데 안에 근데 줄레다 젠라더네. 어딘데 주데 젠라더네 총대 버저랬어다. 이거들.
So the 50th verse says that understand or know that the aggregates or in this case the self does not exist independent of cause. It does not exist by chance, or it does not exist from time. When we say time, it means it doesn't exist permanently, that there is no continuum that is unchanging, that has been existing from the very beginning, uh, and then it still exists without any change. That is not the case. And that the self does not exist by its own accord, that is by nature. And then similarly, the self does not exist intrinsically. And nor there is a sort of like a permanent or all-powerful being that created the self. There isn't the case where there is like a all-powerful, permanent, unchanging being there who had made the self. And nor it is without any cause and exists independently. But the very self that we have exists from our ignorant deeds and our cravings from many past lives and our impression of those things.
응업중 어제데 가서나 타타바토가 제가 계획도거든요. 발제 영화 성경이 아니 발제 쪼고 숨도 되는 거다데. 되게 책대 데려다 먼저 군주로 숨더라. 수림 뒤식 초대 랑들라 친질로고 따다 대좀데스. 군도 저거 대숨 타바이스 통제 국에 라보라 켐바저스 시딩스들이.
So the 51st verse talks about how to cast off the three fetters which are obstacles to the liberation. So the actual verse from the text states, understand these three to be fetters to samsara and obstacles to the gates of the city of liberation, adhering solely to morality and asceticism, mistaken views of self-individuality, and doubt.
된적에 안에 타바토가 계획 간대치라나 담보대 안에 타발라 안에 롬메드에 삼도 지은 거다. 타발라 롬메드에 삼도 지은 거. 아니 직전에 안에 타발라 안에 타바던 그 남을 봤던 지 아니 대좀사에 나대 숨쉬고다. 타발 롬메드에 로치고다. 타바톰도 그 롬버 찍기. 근데 나 지금 남을 봤던 찍지. 근데 안에 남을 대좀지고 타발 대좀지고 타발 남이하다고 되는 대좀사에 주로 대숨지 안에 되게다 그렇게 줘.
So when we ask how does these three fetters actually cause obstacles in our pursuit of the liberation, is adhering solely to morality, what it does is that sometimes it demotivates us from actually going out and then adhering towards the practice of attaining liberation by solely adhering to morality and asceticism. And then sometimes what happens is that because of the mistaken views of self-individuality, we tend to astray from the path of liberation. And then finally, we have the doubt towards the liberation, thinking whether if it actually exists or not. So because of these three fetters, we're unable to advance ourselves towards liberation. And this is how they cause us obstacles towards the pursuit of liberation.
단단한데다 빼도 차샤와나다 타바데 당한데 디라다 로사데 소제 유티 르 유도 destination engine on didora tang the pedo cha cha na da music chomal da korang mi yut so destination de chomal lang ma da ko chomal lang ma la ko ya de 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 mi yut do sim ya da ko de de che chi ting da de ya level che la ne pa che do ko jin sum ya da ko jin sum tang ba chi ka sa na chomal lang da la don de me sam la le de de me sam la de me sam la de kar chen le sa 신학계다고나 정말 나는 로바이나 앞에 작품들 얘기도 막 작화나는 사는 힘이 없습니다. 연하대 옥시전이네 요라 이래 쏘는 데는 마땅해 강하래 선데 되게 신앙 삼로질래 신앙 삼로데 견제 안에 그 좀몇 별로 질래 근데 당보들 좀몇 대 당스
So putting this, so giving an analogy for this, an illustration, imagine that liberation is the destination. So let us take an instance of a person who aims to climb the Mount Everest. So there are three obstacles that comes in front of him, before him, which can obstruct his ambition. And the first one is, as we see here, adhering solely to morality and asceticism is given an analogy here, saying that the unwillingness to climb the mountain. And this unwillingness or the lack of motivation to climb this mountain might be because of the fear that the person, he or she, may die, or the thought that if I try to climb this mountain due to the lack of oxygen, they might die. So therefore, because of those minds, we see that the first obstacle tend to stop the person from achieving the goal. So this is the analogy for the first one, adhering solely to morality and asceticism.
내가 니와데 고된 니와데 가서나 남 로봇도 맞지 따고 되어 전도 로죠 전도 예가 그 메신 받을 거제 되고 랑아 하고 오면은 메지 저라다 데 본베도 나 딜레도 버진에 저런 메트리나나 도나 니마숨 도나 레그레스 서거다 야나 자전나라데 트나나 도바나 된다직 도바이나 근데 레그레스 남 로봇도 바이나 남 로봇에 제서 그 당 도바이나 그 주문 나는 레베지 디 제가 말 가서 주문 나만 레레요 말 근데 트디네 단 로사요 말아 근데 남 로봇도 바이나
So the second, which is the mistaken view of self-individuality. So in this case, imagine that the person wants to travel to Mount Everest, but he doesn't know how to travel there. And then he meets someone and they say, okay, so to get to Mount Everest, you need to travel 3 days from Mumbai in train, and then you'll reach Mount Everest. Or other person says, no, you have to take a ferry or a boat and then travel for 7 days. So we see that because these people have led him into a wrong path, he will never reach Mount Everest, because of which he will never be able to climb the Mount Everest. So this is an analogy for the second one, which is mistaken view of self-individuality.
네, 자, 수바데 가서나 아니 최선살다. 미 야버티가 남의 야버도 저는 내가 봐도 그래. 저는 된다. 뭐는 대신에 당한 표준으로 해지다. 표현해 준도 니요라 내발준. 저는 이 조사 되는 여러 남대 야버도 봐야나. 따고 덤바데 남대들 아니 이제 맞아 봐. 독봤어. 나는 뭔 에브리스는 근데 야버트인데 추어주는 매를 섬다. 근데 그 최선지요. 최선대 관계 안에 그 최선지어는 그 내가 지금 말아. 안에 따르게 말아. 때마다 태점디 대순계 안에 열레라 안에 고견치 그래서 아주 지단 리더 자와이나 차샤나 마운트블레스 어디나 신 답배도디라.
So the analogy for the third one is, for instance, this person who wants to climb the Mount Everest actually meets an honest and a genuine person. And that person tells him, oh, if you want to climb Mount Everest, you either go from Tibet or from Nepal. And then the person, instead of believing that that genuine person, starts doubting, oh, maybe this person has not told me truth. Maybe this is a lie. Or there may be other doubts saying like, maybe Mount Everest is not worth it actually. Why should I go there? It's not worth it climbing there. So because of these doubts, he will not embark on this journey and never reach Mount Everest. So therefore, this is the analogy for the third, which is doubt.
나 배되는 진짜 되는 거잖아. 다 당보대 안에 가서 드럼면도 로실래도. 타바톱면도 로시. 타바톱면도 로데 간에서는 신앙 왕들 그랬어. 신앙 가지려서 타바토라 저나 타바토에 있나 타바토벨 가르쳐서나 담에 공거래라다 담에 공거래라 담에 배도배 시랍데 공벌 때네 아니 녀몽 받는 잡아 맞제네 타바토 그래서라 담에 뭐 공부하나 당봉한 적이 있다 뭐 쉬우지 따도 따배 따와 숙점 쇼 컴대 따다와 숙점 검사되는 담에 따도 되는 담에나 배등하야 아니도 예방하대 민족 삼자게 셈나는 신나지 다 담에 따마 겁나 근데 그 담에 따배 건배 관계니 신한데 관계 아니 다 병원에다 다 쓰면 내가 배도 민도 배도 가게 민도 레전드 정말 민도서 디렉 셈나는 신한데 담에 다 담에 따와 겁나 가서는 저기 따도 따와도 쉬고 컴대 네 관계 아니 타바토리를 아니 민도별로 제야 되니 디 따와 디 따도 따와 디 가서는 공배왕 남의 공부를 다 받으면 남의 공부라 다음에는 남의 공부나 가져 다시고 얘네다 그 다음에 와는 하냐 되고 다들 민족 삼장의 신앙지 진지 뒤진이 안에 공대매가 다 받으면 별로 좀 받았다 못
So, the first obstacle, adhering solely to morality and asceticism. So here we see that in the illustration, there was a fear. And in this case, the fear would be accepting the view of selflessness. So when we try to cut through the illusion of the truly existing self, we have to practice in the arising of the wisdom pertaining selflessness or the emptiness of self. When we tend to practice towards this, what happens is that our impression of many lifetimes, which has made us so comfortable with the idea of a truly existing, independently unitary existing self, it starts disintegrating that idea and concept, and we lose that comfort of thought. And because we lose that comfort of thought, it is replaced by a sort of a fear, saying that that self that has been existing truly, which I believe, is now being deconstructed. And because of that fear, many a times we are unable to seek liberation because of the fear of our impressions. And it's also because not only because of the independent, but a permanent, a sort of like a permanent sense of self, that self exists permanently. Because of these views, there is a fear when we start deconstructing through those views. And then there is this sense of comfort that has been, usually we say that this self that exists independently and permanently is the actual sort of like object of abandonment. But because of our impression, we feel that that is our sort of like a space of comfort and safety. We take comfort and safety in that idea. And as this practice of arising the wisdom pertaining emptiness of self or selflessness starts deconstructing that idea, there is a fear that takes place in us because now we're moving beyond that comfort. So therefore, because of this fear, we might not have enough motivation to pursue liberation.
난 이번에 나 주름다 되게 좋대 세저로 때 남을 먹었던 것 한번 지다 군다로 관계 좀에 별로 찌라 이번에 주름다 되게 좋대 또 주름다 되게 좋대서는 남을 먹었던 거 답변은 주름 로바 주름 로바서는 다 소소가 다 타버터 배치도 안에 소소가 다 주름 가르친 거잖아 다 명가 때 맞아서 소소 속발하는 멜라 쪽부터 매쪽에 안에 디레 배트 강가 마세바 배트 보통 받대 되고 속바 디레 저러 디레 전화 저랑 되죠 디레게 로바 디레 안에 수렴성을 있잖아요. 타바톱에서. 근데 남들 잡아나 대저도 당하나 타바톱도 말했어. 수렴대 로바지. 자 뛰슈 로바스나 가서 메카시알다 네 친구다요. 개왕한마디 채용다 가시알. 수란신 개왕한마 된다네. 가시알 개왕한마디 심제도 된데 전도 팍바도 치도 된다네. 개와도 그런 ran신 레왕 채용고 메카시. 된다네. 땅가 개왕한마디 팍바해샤스. 하나 치레샤스. 네게 안에 왕게 단단한 미차자선 또 매일 lö다 거라나 치다 팍받는 생게 줘봐지 뒤죽지 근데 그 땡땡한테 열었다 전제가 아니냐 뒤죽로 봐 대남로 봐 근데 제바에는 제바치만 미터에서 되는 요 근데 그 제바에는 타바토벨 쏘고 근데 그 로바티 원 들어가이나 아니 타바토도 말했어
So the second one, mistaken view of self-individuality. So sometimes we seek liberation through the sole practice of asceticism or some other practice of certain doctrine, which, for example, sometimes some practices which involve self-harming towards attainment of liberation or harming of others for liberation. These are all wrong views. We tend to pursue liberation, but we are being misled in that path. And because of this particular sort of like misleading idea of liberation, we never attain liberation. The second is false realization. So some people, they tend to have like, because of certain reason and circumstances, they tend to remember their past lives, and they remember themselves being maybe a dog or a pig. And so they feel that they have realized something, and then they tell to themselves, they say, oh, there is no such thing as liberation. This lifetime, I have taken a birth as a human. Next lifetime, I'm going to take a birth as a sow or a dog. And because of that misunderstanding, they say that there is no liberation. And so therefore, because of these mistaken views of self-individuality or other misleading path, there is a possibility that it will not be, the person will never be able to attain liberation.
순바디 안에 타발라 대좀 살다 타파세데 요즘 말에 삼삼지 근데 그 대좀 레바인 타파 토비가 남 미지기 한다 봤던 바이나 따딜에 예제 맞아 타파세데 요즘 말에 삼 근데 그 대좀 개와이나 대좀 개와가 안에 타파 토비라 안에 락레 따르게 말 타파 토비를 냠제 지금 말 배제 지금 말 대마제 배전다 안에 타파 토비요 말했어 그래서 나다 대숨도 다보대는 직다 군다게 안에 왕게 직받지 그 안에 타파 토비입니다 로치 이와 주름나 되셔줘도 남라거든. 다 순바데 타발 예제메와다. 하나 타발 남 뜸바이나 되라 예제 맞아와이나 대순간 타바탑도 맞아. 타바탑에 계속 좀 인디네스.
So the third factor is the doubt. Either doubting the person who genuinely teaches you the path to liberation, thinking that what they are saying is not the truth, or either having a doubt whether or not if there actually is something called liberation. And because of these doubt, one might not will, and one might not have the sort of motivation to pursue the path of liberation. So, uh, so therefore, the three fetters which creates obstacles towards the attainment of liberation. The first one, which we discuss, is because of our great comfort in the idea of a permanent and independent self. And when an idea starts deconstructing that, there is a fear within ourselves. And the second one is simply following a wrong path or being misled, because of which the attainment of liberation becomes impossible. And the final one is doubting either the one that is showing the path or the idea of whether there is a path or not towards liberation. And because of these three factors, one is unable to attain the liberation.
근데 이제 따다나 납중 아니더라도 납중 아니를 안에 타벨하나 소소 배바찬일 조고레스레시다. 식도 되려자. 타파 달라 달레 딜레니스 신지 토지 칭 매치베스 초단 수름 3대 템바이스 템바 넘바 실라 페퍼저스 온디르스.
So the 52nd verse, to practice the three disciplines which are conducive to liberation. The verse from the letter to a friend. Since liberation depends on oneself and not on any help from others, cultivate the fourfold truth through possessing study, morality, and concentration.
tanda de da tsige de kasana tapase de bede sosorang jogore ma da ji simba de ma ji global sem de wa da ani ya tene mi ji ya tin ya ke sha da wa da tene le sok wa de ke yo mars ta tapa to ma da sosorang la rak le res ta soso ge ani beje sena lawasum tanga de lawasum de ko kunyu me ka lawasum de churim dinge de shirap la ba la 나 덴바실라 다 덴바실라 담보 동아 ngoi 제바세 동아 ngoi 제바 동아 주이 메 제바세네 제바세네 동아 주이 메 봤어 매버스에게 남은 곰발 때네 아니 타바토 그랬어. 근데 그 남은 남샤제 좀 됐다 손으로. 어디 아니 베제체 와이나 란레 따라 와이나 소 타바토 그래. 그래서 나 타바세 때문에 시직 미직 라심데 버저다. 근데 아니 심바지 야틴 야 야샤 근데 요 말. 소소한 게 타바토 맞았어. 소소한 게 소소한 라락레레스. 어디에 시켜보다 좀.
So the 52nd verse tells us that liberation can only be attained by the endeavor of the self. It is only attained when one apply oneself in the path of practice. It is not something that one can just hold hand of someone and then they can take them or they can just carry them from one place to another. It depends solely on oneself and one's own practice and endeavor. And so Buddha said that the attainment of this path is only possible by the application of the three practices, which are the practice of study, morality, and concentration. So because through these three, one is able to actually possess the cultivation of the path, and so one can attain the path of liberation. And so this particular verse tells us that it depends solely on oneself, and that there is no one who can help us in this path of attainment of liberation, and thus we must depend on the practice of the three disciplines.
그래서 타바세를 그래서 저는 뉴알라 타르 타바데서 오라 코발라 타르 타바. 또 타바세의 소속이 아니 에 하야게 담보 뉴아 등 거지. 뉴아 등 거지 발 때네. 뉴아도 상마 매워서 tum나. 아니 다 타바톱스 다 디랑. 제 타바세의 얘기를 간도 가지고 여대버도 이제 사자도 심바지를 쪼고에 쪼고 다 디네케요 말스. 나 사자 심바지 남라 때야 토 남도 와 여도버도다. 뭐 심바도 가지고 사자 심바지를 쪼고에 쪼고 디네게 초바도 레고 당하는데 에 따와도 저도 타바스 탑슨 베시 워도 로테버도 토고 쇼인도 버도 근데 그 제가 말해 소소에 썸로 나로 어느 년목마다 쏘고야네 진짜 정말 매와 쏟던 날에 타바토리스 티토비에 될 남대 저당마 땡샤를 좀 되대 어디 안에 따와 소 타바토리스.
So when we say liberation, liberation is nothing but liberation from suffering, liberation from the samsara. To dispel all the suffering is liberation. Usually, when we tend to think about the concept of liberation, we tend to think about a sort of like a realm that is entirely different from where we are, like a realm that is above us, or something that is a different place where we go when we get liberation. That idea is in itself is something that does not adhere purely to liberation, because when we talk about liberation, it has to do more about more towards our mental state rather than the physical materialism. So when we talk about liberation, it's more like tending to the understanding of attaining a sort of like a peace of mind, to have our mind in a more stable state. And this is what and so that we may be free from all the suffering. And this is what we call liberation. Not the idea that there is like a higher level of existence that we go towards, and there is a place where we are going to go, and then everyone there will be free from suffering. No, it's more like a mental attitude, or sort of like a mental state where we are free from all those suffering that exists. So therefore, the idea of liberation is more focus internally rather than materialistically or externally.
이제 아니 단다 근데 타바토벨라 아니 남냠레 줘라. 냠레 전에마다 타바토고 말아. 대토바라 냠레 토 저발라 아니 간저 전바세트 백해 좀 쉬고서. 그래서 나타 특제게 업종 없이 버디 아니 전반이 셨어요. 저 전바 정도돼. 백해 좀 쉬었는데 다 특제디 특제래서 원주 류도 전바 대식지 로바지 남도 여봤댄스. 테니 딤냥 엄바 송지디스 전반 냠베 추기지 버추루스 특제래서.
And so, in the attainment of the liberation, it's very important to practice and cultivate. And for the practice and cultivation, it's very important to have like a very clear and sharp memory and mind. And because of which, as we have already discussed, it's very important to be mindful, to have the practice of mindfulness. So therefore, the 53rd verse says, always be disciplined in the highest morality, highest wisdom, and highest trance. More than 150 disciplines are very included within these three. The what in Sarva? No. O Lord, mindfulness regarding the body was taught to be the only path to liberation by the Sugata. Since the loss of mindfulness will destroy all virtues, guard it well through steadfastness.
다들 가지고 네 가지나 네 라바숨다 저거 냠레 집에 가서 안에 쳔바데 배 개체 뭐 쇼치고 있어. 소주 냠레 가르쳐나 네 안에 쳔면 하나 매바이나 네 냠레 상말라 줘서. 배나 추림송 되고도 사실은 추림송 동계다 라바숨에 그 추림게 라바 안에 뭐 무슨 개체 제시 같은데야 쳔바데 땜범 매바이나 소주 가르쳐 거요입니다. 가르가르 개체 제시 받데 쳔면 하나 매바이나 네 왕게 쳔바데 여보 마송에 템바 여보 맞종에 찐지 소소게 냠내 되려봐 된 수렴 잡아 냠 수렴 잡아 된다 소고요 된다 생 안에 라바 시랍다 땡이 될수 된다야 더 템바데 매바이나 된적이 냠내데 대차로스 다다 양다고 차용 거 맞어 그래서 템바 니셨을 때 계속 마셔보세요.
So, for the first case, the importance of mindfulness, to be mindful is usually when we do the practice, we have to conduct ourselves in a certain way. And to conduct ourselves into a certain way, we tend to take different vows. And if we are not very mindful about these vows, sometimes what happens is that we tend to forget that we have taken these vows. And because of the forgetfulness, some of our actions go in contrary to our vows, and so we tend to go against our own vow, and because of which the practice of discipline is not being upheld. And so therefore, to be mindful about your vows is to be able to conduct oneself in accordance to the in accordance to the discipline which is portrayed by these vows. And if one doesn't have a very mindful if one is not very mindful about these things, they tend to forget all of these things, and because of which it will destroy all the virtues, and their practice will not be they would not have a good practice. All of the practice that they do, they will be fault in those practices.
대전 대 응압증은 숨도 별로 있어 많아다 딜라 있었다. 딜라시다. 사bat surim lava shiraptans lakwa semna tado lavartis lawang janga chepju thanjingnis sumbudile yanda dubarchum sa dege lawasum shoda tajeng lawasum de shedo jain sa siktima nominda anda lakwa surim je lava shirapje lava dingeti lava lawasum de shoda ta lawasum de jejala tene dene sum shoda nangje surim lava tengena dubetenese ting이다 시럽 lava tene ngomba ting이들라 또 되되네서 어딘데게야 배자나나 마셔요. 내가 배자대 카레 라바숨 되네 카레 되서나 되 저잘 봤다. 저잘 봐봐. 숨이 라바땡데나 도대 되베데네레스. ting이들 라바땡마나 또 되되네레스. 시라자 라바땡나 문베데네스. 어딘데게야 라바숨데 되네 아니 되네 숨데야 저와데 시에스.
So it seems that we have skipped through the 53rd verse. It says, always be disciplined in the highest morality, highest wisdom, and highest trance. More than 150 disciplines are verily included within these three. So in this particular verse, it talks about the practice of the discipline, morality, and wisdom, which is the three disciplines. So when we talk about the entire content of Buddhism, it is divided in three baskets of knowledge. So three baskets of knowledge. So the teachings which are in regards to morality and the way to conduct oneself are in the basket of discipline or Vinaya. And then there is the basket of wisdom and the basket of the sutra. So all these three are understood as the three basket, or the entire content of the 48,000 body of the teaching by the Buddha.
자, ngapju ngata ngatu ni do. Sede meda lila. Sede ani ngatu ke mezese te pette korana diris metak bares. Juba to chocho res tempo. Tempo juna yomar. Sede metak bares. Ngami lila ya nyangbo yomares. Ya kot pa ta chawaina lila nyangbo juna yomares. O dindege tsikting do ta. Tsikde ani tsikde ni do. Ani sende nema lungi taba is. Chui buba leja metanas. 웅주 니지 로바나스 세군 칸라 테 모타르체스 르다 타와 타감 테두기 타두기스 타마 미자인 님 메지베스 남바라 징이 냐바라 주바데스 식제 니데르스
So the 55th and the 56th verse, to renounce attachment to one's body, which is impermanent and without essence. So here, Nagarjuna is stating that life itself is impermanent and and the body that we possess is without any essence. And so he states that life is impermanent. It is beset by many misfortunes, like a bubble of water caught by the wind that one inhales after exhaling and awakens from sleep. It's wonderful. Know that the insubstantial body at the end becomes ashes, dried, protrude, or impure, will be completely destroyed and despoiled, and its constituents dispersed.
그래서 당 저기 르데네 주네 메기 메데스 템보 주네 말스 추 부바나시 베트거라 남산 주바토 초초 아니 데 내야라 네 베트거라 곡제 슉 뭐쇼자 시진여로 남지 어딘데 그 담다나 아니 데미 시진가 번나 중앙으로서 어딘데 gen지 센데니 르데메가 소소 메데메가 차이 나나지 난게 아니 내려서 봐 어딘데 뭐 쇼버지 내야라 베트거라 디시 다타고 쇼지가 내데 번나지 요레스 디시네 딘데게 다 엄마데 내가 엄마데 쳐버렸어 데 마세다 딜라 아니 디 그시 가도 르드 차자바나 그시 그디 타마타마데라 아니 디 차도스 멜타와나 커다로스 탈라진 거 건데 뭐 대표도 아니 르드 따바나 닝고야 말았어 그래서 르드 항상 이거 잡아 시에요 말했어다 저거데 르드 잡아지 메들 잡아지 말았어 잡았다 베베 쳐버렸어 가서 르드 메데들 안에 때문에 말았어 다 최초가 나도 드린 제거서 산이 제거서 이제 샤야만 가도 제거서 뒤도 고쳐 버렸어. 이제 류트 메데는 때 뭐야 말했어. 류트는 영 뭐야 말했어. 됐어.
So, so the verse states that life is impermanent. So, the life is like a bubble of water which is caught in the wind. It can burst anytime. It is that unstable and impermanent. And when we look at our body, it is without essence. It could be destroyed any second. And so, for us to sustain, to be alive, there are many factors and causes and misfortunes, both external and internal, which at any second could kill us. For example, the external causes, there are multitude of external causes and factors that might just end our life at any seconds. And there are many causes internally, like the disease we might catch, which could end our life in any instance. Similarly, we see that when after the death, when our body is cremated, it just turns into ash. And so we see that dried, protrude, and impure. And therefore we see that there is nothing there, which is something that is an object of attachment. So by thinking about this again and again, one should denounce or one should renounce attachment to one's body. So this is a practice or a meditation which helps us to renounce the attachment towards one's body, because at the end it is without essence and it turns into ash. So there is no object of attachment there.
그래서 먼저 메데데 룬나기 마면나 저랬어 남정도 쇼. 또 맘에지 저 표현에 샤샤나 처음에로 룽교되나 배 룽기 파요 초요 전전도 룽 초보자와나 배 메시지라. 딘데게 배 템포 전에 배 뭔가 쇼지 간내 되고 딘데 차래. 대선하다 가르쳐 오잖아. 다 매제 되는 걸로 딘데 내당데 매제 내당 엄마들 다 농당 만면나지나 다 매제는 냥볼래 가요래 서티버런데 다 냥볼래 요래 다 추념래 제도에나 수족에 추념래 제배 교가 잡아서 소모도 수족에 내 저번에 트럭탐자도 막 그래요. 누가데 어디 수직 터도 말았어. 대선도 안에 추념래 제가데 그들 제가 삼나야 대들랑 고쪽으로 마다 다산이 제에서 말은 로종마 제에서는 내 전투저 러시아스 저저 주는 거 말았어. 대매들은 담아드는 안에 저가 제마도 그게 말았어.
So another illustration is life is like a flame of a lamp which is caught in a wind. So when the wind blows in the east, it is blown towards the east. When it's blown towards the west, it's blown towards the west. When the wind blows towards the south, it's blown towards the south. And when there is a very strong wind, the flame extinguishes. And similarly is the life. So therefore, we see that life itself is always changing. It's not permanent. And that at any instance, it might just end. But now when we think about the instability and the impermanence of life, one might just feel like, what is the essence of life? What should I even do with such a life that is so unstable and could end any minute? In that case, one should understand as the very essence and the purpose of life is in the practice of dharma. Every second that they are able to, they should apply oneself towards the practice of dharma. And because through this practice, one can make the life meaningful. But then many a times we also have this idea of permanence where we say that I'll do it tomorrow. Let's do it later. There's this procrastination. We say that I have time later. Oh, when I get older, I will do it. But the thing is that time is something that stops for none. And then as we procrastinate each day, at the end of the day, we come to a point where now we are no longer, it's the end of our life and there's no longer time to practice. And then at that time, there's nothing but regret within us. So therefore, one should remind oneself that life is changing and it's all impermanent. And the only thing that could make life meaningful and with essence is the practice of dharma. And it's not something that should be done tomorrow or day after tomorrow or when there's holiday. It should be done now and from this very instance.
그래서 나 드링데 샤샤느라 저거 되면은 저번 뉴스나.
So Geshe is saying, so this will be it for today. And if anyone has questions, Geshe could take 2 questions.
Yes, Diptila,
Diptila.
go ahead.
So can maybe Geshe offer some clarification about Nagarjuna's view on mind, in the sense that there is like a mind-only school, I believe, and at some level, reality seems to be, or our relative reality seems to be mind-generated, but perhaps what does Geshe think, or maybe what does he think Nagarjuna's view on, the true essence of reality in relation to mind is? Sorry, I don't know if I've formulated the question very well, but I guess what I'm asking is Nagarjuna refuting the idea of the mind-only school? And what, just some clarification on where we're heading towards in terms of getting the correct view.
라서 계실라 코란기 주어 카르실라 나가 저기 지단 단다 딩외데 다 코란기 세시지 나로 칠라서 다나가 저기 파견 루주 요로 다 코란기 가 저기 다 셈라 단 다기 두츠지 아니 nga cho tengwe ta gi tu chu kan ke je she tu ta sem gi tu chu kan ke she tu tan da sem zam be gi nga chu gi kun shi nam she kan chi sherwa ta tan da phagin lu tu khora rang gi tan da nga chu gi ta shing ob ne chu la cha ta nga chu gi thon tam gi ne lu she ba ti ta sem khora rang la te be ta sem rang kan te be khorang gi tan da tu chu di kan de chi des an tu chu di gi tan da ga bon de na ta nga zo pong chu nang lo la nga chu sem zam be ki 따로 땡아 최기 디기 가자지 차고 오레스 nga zui ta ki tu chuna an tende ji khona ki thore sha
오늘 단대디 저번에 땡서 버려셔다 간선하다 공부를 저기 그런 게 다다 셈세 줘라 다디에서 공부를 저기 당 앉아 낭박에 두다 두다 카 택진을 니다 택면라데 니 두다 시시고다 신에도 딱 공부를 저기 두다데 음마들라냐랑 주보다 텐주가 니 주드네 딱 공부를 저기 해야 당 앉아 남지 앉아게 가르치고 정말 오늘 저도 오늘 저 시작 때는 밤에서 엄마 던지베 따와대 따와시 남배 따와시 막하셔 있나 딱 값수파베 뒤에 되게 삼바다 내절 반에 에는 셔요스 배심자 따와도 차잖아 어디서는 고물로 그 때는 법시 따와대다 오늘 저 가림 받는 밤이었어 근데 에네 다 세트 컨디션나 다 세대 에네 동바래라다 다스네 타냐 때베 째나 아니 소고나 셈 거에나 째와나 띠다레 세대요 다 뭐만 하긴 되레스 되는 생게 셈세대야 차투마 셈 깨진 거들서 봐 차투마 째봐나 셈대 째요 말스 이나 다다 셈니 파조 직질을 땡대여스 어디 직제 아니 되는 시간에 셈 잠바게 따바테나 안 고문도 그 네 가봤자요 셈 잠바 근신 남시 세대 다다 안 셈 잠바 템퍼처 봐서 스캔 디아니마 가자 가요르다데 나든지 네 가자들 가샤라 안 좁았던데 배 찾지 오셔요 그것도 남산 남나 아니야 데 코에 코에나 메나 마세 에너지나 디토라 아니 띵 사보겠다 좁아요 셈잠바다 데 엄마 배버를 내가 전에 거면은 좁아먹고 잡살다 디토 띵 사보겠다 좁아요 데 셈자베 따바데 가요르스다 도도시나
so Geshe said that yes it's a very deep and profound question that you have asked in regards to the concept of mind by Nagarjuna. So Nagarjuna so we know that different Buddhist philosophical school, they talk about different sort of like assertion of self. And definitely when we talk about the philosophical schools, so there are two, usually we term them Hinayana schools or Theravada. And then there are three Madhyamika schools of Buddhist philosophy. And the Nagarjuna asserts the idea of self and mind being empty of intrinsic nature. So there is no self-sustaining, substantial existence of self, as well as there is no unitary, independent self. So self is empty of all these things. And similarly, mind is also empty of these things. And when Nagarjuna formulates his understanding or asserts his understanding of self, he does through the Prasangika Madhyamika school. He states that all phenomena, including self and the mind, is through the mere imputation of the mind, that there exists nothing which is independent of this imputation. And the answer to your question, which is whether Nagarjuna actually sort of like refute the concept of mind-only school. Yes, true. Nagarjuna does refute the understanding or the assertion of self by the mind-only school, because they assert this alaya as the true sense of understanding of the self, and then mind-only school also exerts the understanding of true existent phenomena. So Nagarjuna completely denounce or refute these ideas through his own understanding. But the sort of like the debate between these two schools is something that is very profound and very elaborate. Usually takes few years to understand these debates. So therefore, Geshe said that he might not be able to just summarize everything in this single answer. So, but if you go and then if you actually study these sort of like debate between Nagarjuna and the masters of mind-only school, you'll see that he actually refutes them completely through his own philosophy.
근데 이제
Okay.
나 내배치기는 나 나가주는 데 샘자베서나 nga 제바이나 타냐다베 따뜻자베서나 녀요를 당가 가르서나 근신 남시를 해서 되는 거다 건데 왜 근신 남시 세바데 남정한데 남시 언제 남지 왕봉가다 이제 남시라 대를 타바 그것이었다 왕봉가를 왕봉가 초를 되면서 시었다 근신 남시에 니유스는 제시오 남시 초 제시오다 남정한데 남시 왕봉가자 이제 남시 촉시오라 되게 제시오다 근데 저는 갖고 있어요. 다른 다른 가르스는 남 근신 남지 세대에 조금 다 씁니다 막. 나 고물로 되는 다 세대 조금 주는 요 말았어. 근데 되는 다스는 간대 주스는 다스는 풍부나 땡 삼지. 저방하면 심한 로탱게. 근데 레 준대기다. 레 남지 탐제네 막어 가서 어디 가자다 막 그런 게. 근데 저래 나 조조는 데레스테요 말았어. 소소 용거리스 냠용 소 냠은 용 토그레스 조고존에 데레스테요 말았어. 대자바 안에 풍부나 딱 왔삼지. 삼록 봤다 왔는데 따레스. 고멍을 댄데베 근데 내가 채된 게 아니 자체 채된 것들 아니 따레스. 어디에 봐 로그 봐 저거 잠깐만도 동호회 또또 때 다녔잖아 데레스테요 막 따제 채베구나 때요 말았어.
So Nagarjuna refutes the idea of a self that exists independently. For example, the mind-only school asserts a self that exists, which is the usually in the school of Vibhashika and Swatantrika, we see that there and other schools we see that when we talk about mind, there are the five gate consciousness and the consciousness of the mind, but the Chittamatra or the mind-only school asserts that there is indeed 8 different minds, and out of this, the mind that is called alaya is the mind which is asserted as the self, the true self, the existing self. Nagarjuna refutes this idea completely. He states that the concept of mind or the self is that mind exists merely through the imputation, and there is nothing that exists independent of this imputation. There's no mind that truly exists. There's no self truly existing which is independent of this imputation. And so, therefore, in the Prasanga Madhyamika school, Nagarjuna asserts that idea that everything that exists, it exists through the mere imputation of the mind. And then if we do a thorough examination or analysis of an independent self, when we go and do that examination, we come to a conclusion that after the examination, there is no self there, which exists independent to the imputation. And so therefore, this is the assertion of Nagarjuna, and he completely refutes the idea of Chittamatra that there is a true existence and there is a self that exists independent to this imputation and exists grossly independent to the concept.
Okay.
That's so Geshe Lobsang Nikilal Chuvachito.
Yeah, I have a question. Just when can we go back to when we did the practice with the visualization? There were two kinds of people we did the practice on. One was somebody close to us, and then one was a total stranger. I was wondering if we choose to focus on someone who we know, but who has been basically intentionally causing us a lot of harm in our life. And if we choose to focus on them instead with compassion and loving kindness, how should this be approached? And also another question is, how, how will it benefit and who will it benefit more? Will it benefit, maybe this is not the correct way to ask this, will this benefit them more or us more, or considering all the topics we've been discussing today about the self and, basically that there is no self, does it even matter? Is it just going to benefit everything and everyone?
La song ge la Quran gi chwa de tanging nga chwe ki kom nyam ne chen ba ge shla nga chwe ki de taring ge nga chwe ki lobsen ma chung de tol re sha ta ta nga chwe kom ge de nga chwe ki khangsa ring ni la nga chwe ki mi che kom kya ra ning je ta cham ba de thong ma de nga chwe ki ta go nyo ta ta ani nyo ta den re chi che ani ba de nga chwe ki pha me gi sem jen chil ro ta Quran gi chwa khar re shal na ke de nga chwe ki su su gi ngo she im ba khang shi la 到度叔叔人那把讲讲给的看看啊，出去身边的这人啊，出去的，康萨的这人啊，就密切的两年前那看着结果的上班的人这个，按等这个上班的人这个两年的结束呢，啊，出去工作了朋友圈有的是，也没那我了朋友圈有的是。 아니 다른 거 저기 다음에 단데 관계 좀 망고 쉐도 다 쉐버데 오니지 마주버 인자 수수 펜토다 셴바질 펜토라데 사모타데 케첨보 매바지 차고 오레스 디 탐젤 펜토아레 삼제 섬로 땅나 드고 오레스 칸데레 베슬라치 다 트와 다카나 데샤
그래서 안다다 드버데 좀 버려야 된다. 아니 년지 공연도 전에 다 소소를 딱봐 여러셔 된게 미줄 년지 공원 공백값소 아니 표절을 팬도 열에 소소를 하는 팬도 열에서 저라. 년지 수익 공나 년지 공개 줘라. 딜러 팬도 열에서. 하바도 된다 소소를 그때는 수부소 된게 미줄 저런 년지 공도 원에데 항상 다들 냠내 세트 버렸어. 가자는 미 견주면 좀 다들 이리도를 년지 공도에 가보시오 그랬어. 가서 그때는 수부소 연도되는 콘로나 콘로 때는 년지 공도 가버려. 또 그새 딘데 년지 공도 보이나 소소라데 제자자 팬. 또 표절 팬만 해서 때 줄다데. 소소 년지 공도 요되게 나 파진 팬에서 가보자 그래. 소소게 아니 년지도 야채들어서 소소 손남 살아서 항상 팬도 열었어. 대체 좀나다 쇼에 냠내 침버렸어. 자 대체 아니 되게 아니 다음에 뭐 공부하나 다 되게 년지 공부 막고나 다스 매웠어 저라. 다 되게 매웠어. 자반이는 매웠어 말했어. 다 탄예도 열어서 매서 와대 된탄 봐 요 말이죠. 탄예도 여봐 쏜다 아니 탄예도 여봐 가지고 자체 정말 제대로 없는 게 된단 봐 요번에 제가 저 차르고도 차반네 정도는 좀 내나냐 탄예 관계 아니 되는 식 소속이다 대독 상만 용되고 있어. 그래서 나가 상만 제대로 되네 아니 대 다음에 봐 있나냐 된 적이 대 레전드라 소보다 년적 겁네 소소를 캐메 용하다 아니 되게 대 매화 차이가 돼 내가 대시 대 가요 맞어 차이가 되지 시대요 말이야. 가잖아. 매서 봐도 전담도 매서 오래 봐도 특히도 요랬어.
코난 기 추어치 디레샤 탄당가 저기 계시 다 쉐버데 코란 메스나 아니 술라 펜토 마톨라디 마토 베왕기 가 저기 다 탐젤라 펜기 유그레 선베 로디 키chen 닝제 곰스나 아니 드고로 베슬라치
네네. 다들 뭐다 다 매나 연애 매나 저면 신제 겁나 소지의 펜토나 디레 년제 겁나야 디스양데 년제디 표절을 하바도 소소응원에 삼로다에 줘라. 그런 급에 가서 딱 봤으면 되게나 술래나 다 딜라 페나 삼상 닝제 다 쪼쪼쪼 닝제 삼당 닝제 다 고 재단 신경이 됐어. 이 삼로 빼 보수도 고 삼로 당당 쪼고쇼 그러셔서 그런 노래 버렸어. 이나야 소소 너 하고 오면 됐어. 닝제 다 딘데 냠 탁바 저래셔. 삼상게 소삼당 돼 봐이나. 근데 표절을 페나 마베나야. 표절을 페나 가버려다. 이나야 소소응 삼로디 숙shum쇼 차로. 근데 년제 검사봐야 년제대 항상 이게 톱춤을 잡고 있어. 다 나나 요 말은 년제 삼도 인데 찾아봐야 디스 년제대 제차로 디스 디스 라워도 차로. 근데 다 년제 다 코로나 치단 신경면 년제 다 근데 냠다 버저래서 근데 저 강왕도 로테셔스 몽바왕 이제 도샤도 산데 년제 다 근데 강아들 도샤다 디 존은 유도 년제 근데 학회에서 저 모연에서 가림 하코나 삼상에 하코바쇼 삼삼 디레게 아니 고민이었어. 근데 제가 이나 편도 좀 보였어.
So of the answer to the first question is Geshe said that when he said that definitely the practice, this particular practice, when you apply to someone that intentionally causes you harm and someone you know, this particular practice is not something that is easily applicable. And it takes a great deal of bravery when you practice this type of compassion. And one should always take that sort of action by thinking that the person who does cause this type of intention are person who are unable to accept that they are doing something wrong. They are ignorant. They don't have enough wisdom to think that what they are doing is wrong, and because of which they are causing you this kind of harm. And so therefore thinking that that person is someone who is ignorant, someone who is without wisdom, unwise, one can do that kind of practice towards these people. And the question whether who it benefits, it definitely benefits the one who practices this compassion and not the one who towards whom it is targeted towards. Because once you replace that anger and frustration with compassion, it gives a great deal of benefit to the one who is able to generate that kind of intent and the mind towards the person who is intentionally causing the trouble or the problem. Now, the second question that you asked, saying that since we talked about selflessness, so the question that it would not matter whether who it benefits, it benefits everyone. So Geshe said that if you generate that mind without a particular focus or intent, at a because of your sort of like practice towards generating towards a single person that caused you harm, if you try to generalize it and say that since self does not exist, so let me just say that since it benefits everyone, I just practice this, it becomes a diluted practice of compassion. There is not enough sort of like emotions and the sort of like the mind and the strength behind that compassion. So therefore, it's always better to target it towards the one that you intend to target it, rather than saying that since it's already since it is like self does not exist, so therefore it doesn't matter who it benefits. But rather, if you just think that it may not directly benefit the person who is causing you harm, but with that sort of practice, what happens is that your compassion becomes much more concentrated towards a single target. And therefore, you can focus that sort of like compassion against those frustration and anger and may benefit you greatly instead of that diluted way of thinking that, it doesn't matter who that person is that I'm uh, targeting the compassion, or it doesn't matter if it benefits me or not. If it benefits everyone, I'll just practice it. So it becomes very diluted in that sense and may not benefit that much. So therefore, it is important to understand whom you are targeting this compassion towards, to understand that the person that is causing you harm is doing it unintentionally, or more clearly saying that without being ignorant to their own action and the consequences of their own actions. And to think that these people are ignorant and unwise, and to generate the mind that targets towards that sense, and to generate the mind of compassion with the understanding of these things will bring more benefit to oneself.
Yeah, thank you for the answer, Geshe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Please join me for the dedication prayers, followed by, a gratitude towards the Sangha and our center, Geshe and Tenzin Lakpala. Dedication prayer from Shantideva's Way of the Bodhisattva. May all beings everywhere plagued by suffering of body and mind obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or even fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvest. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Thank you, Geshe-la. Thank you, Tenzin Lakpala. Thank you, dear Sangha members. And thank you for this space, Mila Chamsi Center, and all those who are supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tenzin Lakpala. Thank you, Mindalina Che. Thank you, everyone.